Battle of Midway, turning point at sea, June 4 to 7th, 1942. What if I told you the greatest naval battle of World War II began with a punch that missed the chin? That Japan's plan to dominate the Pacific unraveled not in a blaze of glory, but in a flurry of broken codes, dive bombers, and one tiny island called Midway. How did a handful of American carriers outwit the most experienced navy in the world? Why did Admiral Yamamoto bet everything on a trap that backfired spectacularly? And what made the Japanese believe they'd sunk 2 US carriers when one of them was still floating and fighting back like Rocky in round 12? This is not just a battle. It's a symphony of miscalculations, heroism, and explosive twists. From Pearl Harbor's sucker punch to the dive bomber's deadly ballet, we'll unravel the full story, one act at a time. So grab your popcorn, tighten your life vest, and prepare to witness the turning point that changed the tide of the Pacific War forever. And hey, before we dive into the chaos, make sure to subscribe, smash that like button, and ring the bell so you never miss another epic tale from history's front lines. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. It all began on December 7, 1941, when Japan decided to crash America's Pacific Party with a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. The goal? Smash the US Pacific Fleet so hard it wouldn't get up before Japan finished looting the Pacific like a kid in a candy store. And smash they did. Battleships sunk, airfields wrecked, sailors stunned. But in their enthusiasm, the Japanese missed one crucial target: the aircraft carriers. Like the cool kids skipping school, USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga were conveniently out of town. Admiral Tadashi later summed it up with the kind of poetic regret only a seasoned warrior could muster. We won a great tactical victory at Pearl Harbor and thereby lost the war. With the US licking its wounds, Japan went full monopoly mode, invading the Philippines, French Indochina, Malaya, Singapore, and the Dutch East Indies. Why? Oil, rubber, iron. Basically, everything you need to run a war in a tire factory. But the US wasn't out. It was bruised, not broken. And those pesky aircraft carriers were still floating, launching hit-and-run raids like rebellious teenagers with curfews. One of those raids, the Doolittle raid in April 1942, sent 16 B-25 bombers over Tokyo. Damage? Minimal. Psychological impact? Massive. Japan's pride took a nosedive, and Admiral Yamamoto decided it was time to lure the US into a trap. Yamamoto's plan was bold, brilliant, and, spoiler alert, doomed. He chose Midway Atoll, a speck of coral 1,300 miles from Hawaii, as bait. Why Midway? It was strategically useless to Japan, but emotionally vital to the US. Like stealing someone's childhood teddy bear, it's not about the bear, it's about the insult. Operation MI was born. Yamamoto split his fleet into 4 groups across hundreds of miles of ocean, assuming the US had only 2 carriers left: Enterprise and Hornet. He didn't know Yorktown, damaged at the Battle of Coral Sea, had limped back to Pearl Harbor and been patched up in just 2 weeks. That's right, duct tape, chewing gum, and sheer American stubbornness. In May 1942, Japan tried to take Port Moresby in New Guinea. The US said, "Not today," and the Battle of Coral Sea erupted. It was the first naval battle where ships never saw each other, just planes doing the dirty work. Japan lost the light carrier Shoho, and the big boys Shokaku and Zuikaku were either damaged or depleted of aircraft. The US lost Lexington, but Yorktown survived. Strategically, Japan failed to take Port Moresby, and more importantly, lost 2 carriers Yamamoto needed for Midway. Here's where the nerds saved the day. US cryptanalysts cracked Japan's JN-25B naval code and discovered Midway was the target. Admiral Chester Nimitz didn't just prepare, he set a trap. He deployed Task Force 16, Enterprise and Hornet, and Task Force 17, Yorktown, plus submarines, cruisers, and land-based aircraft. He knew the Japanese order of battle, their timing, and their formation. It was like showing up to a poker game, knowing everyone's hand. By June 3 to 4, 1942, the Japanese fleet approached Midway, expecting a sleepy American response. Instead, they got a full-blown ambush. The US had 3 fleet carriers: Enterprise, Hornet, Yorktown, 7 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 15 destroyers, 16 submarines, 233 carrier aircraft, 127 land-based aircraft. Japan brought 4 fleet carriers, Akaga, Soryu, Hiryu, 2 battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 1 light cruiser, 14 destroyers, 248 carrier aircraft, 28 float planes. But they also brought overconfidence, scattered forces, and a fatal underestimation of American resolve. At 4:30 a.m. on June 4th, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo launched his first wave from carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. The lineup: 36 HE-D3A Val dive bombers, 36 Nakajima B-5N Kate torpedo bombers, 36 Mitsubishi A-6M0 fighters, 8 search aircraft, 11 PBYs from Midway took off to run search patterns. At 5:30, one spotted 2 Japanese carriers. Midway's radar lit up like a Christmas tree, and sirens wailed. U.S. bombers scrambled, but their fighter escorts stayed behind to defend the island. Major Floyd B. Parks led the defense with Wildcats and Buffaloes. The result? A meat grinder. The U.S. lost 15 fighters, but managed to down 5 Japanese planes. Midway was bloodied but not broken. The airfield still functioned, and bombers could refuel, a critical detail. Nagumo's pilots reported that Midway needed a second strike. Nagumo, ignoring Yamamoto's orders to keep his reserve strike force armed for anti-ship missions, ordered them rearmed for land attack. Then, plot twist, a scout plane finally reported a U.S. naval force to the east, but it didn't say what kind. Nagumo reversed his rearm order, demanded more intel, and waited. Rear Admiral Toman Yamaguchi urged him to strike immediately. But Nagumo hesitated, waiting for his Midway strike force to return. His flight decks were now clogged with refueling planes, bombs stacked like Jenga blocks, and 0 fighters low on ammo. It was the perfect storm of vulnerability. At 7 a.m., Enterprise and Hornet launched their aircraft. Yorktown followed at 8. Admiral Fletcher, battle-hardened from Coral Sea, ordered his planes to attack immediately. No fancy formations, just go. Unlike Japan's doctrine of launching in massive waves, the U.S. sent planes in piecemeal attacks. Risky? Yes, but it kept pressure on the Japanese and disrupted their ability to counterstrike. At 9:20, Waldron's squadron spotted the Japanese carriers. 15 TB Devastators charged in with torpedoes. The 0 fighters shredded them. Most torpedoes missed or failed to explode, but the attack forced Japanese carriers to maneuver wildly, delaying their own launches. 3 squadrons of SBD Dauntless dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown, low on fuel, stumbled upon the Japanese destroyer Arashi, racing to rejoin the fleet. They followed it like bloodhounds. At 10:22 a.m., they arrived. The Japanese carriers were sitting ducks, flight decks cluttered, bombs exposed, fighters refueling. It was like catching someone mid-costume change at a surprise party. Enterprise squadrons dove on Kaga and Akagi. A miscommunication sent both at Kaga, but 2 peeled off to hit Akagi. Kaga took 5 direct hits. Akagi suffered a fatal blow. 1 bomb hit the elevator, igniting fueled aircraft and turning the hangar into a fireball. Lieutenant Clarence Dickinson recalled, "I saw the deck rippling and curling back in all directions, exposing a great section of a hangar below." Japanese aviator Mitsuo Fuchida described the moment. The plump silhouettes of the American Dauntless dive bombers quickly grew larger, then a number of black objects suddenly floated eerily from their wings. Enter VB-3, Yorktown's dive bomber squadron led by the indomitable Max Leslie, a man who flew like he had a personal vendetta against Japanese carriers. His squadron zeroed in on Soryu, and within minutes, 3 bombs turned her into a floating inferno. The Japanese crew scrambled like ants on a skillet, and Soryu was doomed. Meanwhile, the torpedo bombers aimed for Hiryu, the last surviving Japanese carrier. But their torpedoes either missed or politely refused to explode, like party guests who show up but don't dance. Hiryu, now the lone samurai, wasted no time. Hiryu's first counterattack was a squad of 18 D-3A dive bombers with 6-0 escorts, tailing the retreating U.S. aircraft like angry bees. They found Yorktown and dropped 3 bombs that tore a hole in her flight deck, knocking out air operations and forcing Admiral Fletcher to relocate to the cruiser Astoria, probably muttering, "Well, this escalated quickly." But Yorktown wasn't done yet. Her crew patched her up so fast the next Japanese wave, 10 B-5N torpedo bombers and 6 Zeros, thought she was a fresh, untouched carrier. They attacked again, landing 2 torpedoes that crippled her. Japanese pilots radioed back, claiming 2 U.S. carriers sunk. Morale soared. Reality? Only Yorktown was hit. Enterprise and Hornet were still very much alive and very much angry. Late afternoon, a Yorktown scout spotted Hiryu. Enterprise launched 24 SPD Dauntless dive bombers, and despite a dozen Zero fighters guarding her, they struck 4 times, turning Hiryu into a blazing wreck. Her flight deck was toast, her hangars a furnace, and her aircraft grounded forever. Hornet's strike force arrived fashionably late, like guests who miss the main course but still ask for dessert. They did little damage to the escort ships, but the job was done. Hiryu was evacuated. Admiral Taman Yamaguchi and Captain Tomeo Kaku, in true Bushido spirit, chose to go down with their ship. Japan lost not just a carrier, but 2 of its finest naval minds. As night fell, both sides braced for more. Admiral Spruance, fearing a Japanese night attack, changed course. Yamamoto, still clinging to hope, sent surface ships east and a cruiser to bombard Midway. But Spruance's forces had slipped away like shadows, and Yamamoto, realizing the trap, ordered a full retreat west. Had Yamamoto's battleships, including the mighty Yamato, found the U.S. carriers in the dark, the Pacific might have sung a different tune. But fate, fog, and Spruance's caution saved the day. Over the next 2 days, U.S. forces hunted stragglers. Mikuma was sunk by dauntless bombers. Mogami was badly damaged. Yorktown, barely afloat, was evacuated and finally sank on June 7th at 5 p.m. Japanese losses: 4 fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu. 1 heavy cruiser, Mikuma, 248 aircraft destroyed, 3,057 killed, 37 captured. U.S. losses: 1 fleet carrier, Yorktown, 1 destroyer, Hammond, 150 aircraft lost, 307 killed, including Major General Clarence L. Tinker. Among the prisoners were Wesley Osmus, Franco Flaherty, and Bruno Gaido. Osmus was executed by Captain Watanabe of the destroyer Arashi, a war crime that would haunt the records. Watanabe himself died in 1943 when his ship sank, escaping justice by drowning. Midway wasn't just a battle, it was a seismic shift. Japan had superior numbers, experience, and momentum. But they lost their best carriers, their best pilots, and their best chance at winning the Pacific. Had they won, Midway would have fallen, Saratoga would have been the last U.S. carrier, and Japan could have steamrolled into Fiji, Samoa, Australia, Alaska, even Hawaii. Instead, the U.S. went full industrial beast mode, building dozens of carriers while Japan managed just 3. The Imperial Japanese Navy never recovered. And as Admiral Hara Tadashi famously said, "We won a great tactical victory at Pearl Harbor and thereby lost the war." As we come to the end of our video, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment when we drop more thrilling stories from the past. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.